Imagine spending 40 years perfecting your grandmother's apple pie recipe, only to be told you're not allowed to bake it in the kitchen you paid for. That's exactly what happened to me last Thanksgiving when my daughter-in-law Jessica announced she was taking over my kitchen. But here's the thing about 65-year-old widows from Vermont. We don't go down without a fight. I'm Martha Sullivan, and this is the story of how I turned a family power struggle into the sweetest revenge served cold, with a side of property listings. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I've lived in my colonial-style home on Maple Lane for nearly 3 decades. Frank and I bought it back in '96, and we raised our only son, Tyler, within these creaky but charming walls. The kitchen was always my sanctuary. Frank renovated it as a 20th anniversary present, with the cherry cabinets I'd always dreamed of and a double oven that made holiday cooking a breeze. After Frank passed away 5 years ago, the house felt too big, too quiet. But I couldn't bear to part with it. Every corner held memories. Frank measuring Tyler's height against the pantry doorframe, Sunday pancake breakfasts, and midnight conversations over hot chocolate when Tyler was going through his teenage rebellions. When Tyler met Jessica during his final year of law school, I was thrilled. My son, always so serious and focused on his career, had finally found someone who made him laugh. Jessica was beautiful, ambitious, and working on her MBA. On paper, she was perfect. "Mom, she's the one," Tyler told me over coffee, 3 months into their relationship. His eyes had that dreamy quality I hadn't seen since he was 8 and discovered his first astronomy book. I invited them over for dinner the following weekend. Jessica arrived with an expensive bottle of wine and compliments that seemed rehearsed. "This house has such character," she said, running her finger along my vintage hutch. "Very traditional." I didn't miss the slight pause, the careful selection of words, but I brushed it off. First meetings are always awkward, and I wanted to make a good impression on the woman who clearly had my son's heart. Dinner went well. Enough. I made my famous pot roast with rosemary potatoes, Frank's favorite, and Jessica politely ate small portions while asking Tyler if they should really be consuming so much red meat. She mentioned something about a documentary she'd seen about cattle farming. "Mom's pot roast is non-negotiable," Tyler laughed, helping himself to seconds. "It's basically a Sullivan family tradition." Jessica smiled tightly. Well, traditions can evolve. Looking back now, I should have seen it as the first red flag. The wedding came 9 months later, a lavish affair at a vineyard 2 hours away. Jessica's parents, the Moores, covered most of the expense. Richard Moore owned a successful chain of car dealerships across 3 states. And Diane Moore had that polished look of women who lunch and serve on multiple charity boards. They were lovely people, if a bit overwhelming with their loud voices and constant name-dropping. "Martha, so wonderful to finally meet Tyler's mother," Diane air-kissed me at the rehearsal dinner. "Jessica tells us you're still in that quaint little house where Tyler grew up." "Yes, I am," I smiled. "I love my home." "Oh, how sweet." We downgraded too, when the girls moved out. Our lake house is only 4,500 square feet, but it's so much more manageable. I nodded, not bothering to correct her assumption that my 2,400 square foot home was some kind of downgrade. The wedding itself was beautiful, if not exactly to my taste. Everything was crisp white and minimal. Nothing like the colorful, personal wedding I'd imagined for Tyler. But he looked happier than I'd ever seen him, so I kept my thoughts to myself and danced with my son under twinkling lights, trying not to cry when he whispered, "Dad would have loved today." The first 2 years of their marriage, I saw Tyler and Jessica primarily on holidays. They lived about an hour away in a sleek downtown apartment, both busy building their careers. Jessica quickly moved up the ranks at her consulting firm, while Tyler became an associate at his law practice. They seemed happy, if perpetually exhausted. Then came the pandemic, and like many young couples, they reassessed their priorities. Tyler called me on a Tuesday evening in July 2020. "Mom, how would you feel about us moving closer?" My heart leapt. "I'd love that, honey. Are you thinking about the Preston neighborhood? There are some lovely homes for sale there." "Actually," there was a pause. "Jessica and I were wondering if you'd consider downsizing. Your house is so big for just one person." The implication hung in the air. "Are you asking to buy my house, Tyler?" "Not exactly buy," he said carefully. "We were thinking more of a family arrangement. You could move into a nice condo. There's a beautiful senior community by the lake. And we could take over the mortgage. Payments on the house." "Senior community?" I repeated, slightly stunned. "Tyler, I'm 62, not 82, and the mortgage was paid off 5 years ago, before your father died." Another pause. Jessica thought it might be a good financial arrangement for everyone. You'd have less maintenance, we'd have more space, especially if we start a family. "Let me think about it," I said finally, not wanting to reject my son's idea outright. But inside, I was hurt. This was my home, not an asset to be reallocated now that Frank was gone. 2 days later, Jessica called me directly, something that had never happened before. "Martha, I wanted to follow up on what Tyler discussed with you," she began, her voice professionally pleasant. "We've found the perfect condo for you to look at. It's 1 bedroom, but very modern with lots of light and a small balcony for your herbs." I gripped the phone tighter. "Jessica, while I appreciate your thoughtfulness, I'm not interested in moving. This is my home." "But it's such a big house for one person," she pressed. "And think about it. Wouldn't you want your future grandchildren to grow up in the same house where Tyler did? It would be so special." The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. "If and when you and Tyler have children, they will always be welcome here. But this is my home, and I'm staying." There was a frigid silence before Jessica responded. With a tight, "I understand. I'll let Tyler know." Things were tense for a few months after that. Tyler called less frequently, and when he did, there was an undercurrent of disappointment in his voice. It was our first real rift since Frank died, and it pained me more than I let on. By Thanksgiving, however, things had improved. Tyler called to ask if they could spend the holiday with me as they had the previous year. "Of course," I said, relieved. "I'll make the usual: turkey, stuffing, your favorite cranberry relish." "About that," Tyler sounded hesitant. "Jessica's on this new health kick. Would it be okay if she brought a few dishes? Maybe a quinoa salad and some kind of vegan gravy?" "Sure," I said, swallowing my pride. If compromising on the menu would bring peace, I could handle a little quinoa. The more the merrier. When Thanksgiving arrived, Tyler and Jessica showed up 2 hours before dinner was scheduled, Jessica carrying multiple canvas bags full of groceries. "We thought we'd come early to help cook," Tyler explained, kissing my cheek. Jessica was all ready, heading for the kitchen. I bought everything for my contributions. Plus, I thought I'd redo the green beans with almonds instead of that heavy cream soup casserole. Much healthier. I followed her into my kitchen, where she was already unloading her bags, pushing aside the ingredients I'd set out. "Jessica, I've already prepped most of the meal," I said, gesturing to the turkey that was halfway through its roasting time and the pies cooling on the rack. "Oh, don't worry about all that," she waved dismissively. "I can work around it, though I did bring a free-range organic turkey breast as an alternative. The hormones in conventional turkeys are really problematic." I took a deep breath. "This is a free-range turkey from Miller's Farm, where I've bought our Thanksgiving turkey for 20 years. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Well, is it organic? Because studies show—" "Jessica," I interrupted more firmly than I intended. "I appreciate your contributions, but this is my kitchen, and I've been preparing this meal for longer than you've been alive. Her face hardened. Martha, I'm just trying to help modernize things a bit. Some of these recipes seem dated, and honestly, all this butter and cream isn't good for anyone's heart, especially at your age. Tyler walked in just then, his face falling as he sensed the tension. Everything okay here? Jessica turned to him with a sigh. I'm just suggesting some healthier alternatives, but your mom seems resistant to any changes. I looked at my son, expecting him to defend me, or at least mediate. Instead, he gave me a pleading look. Mom, Jessica's put a lot of thought into this. Maybe we could try some of her ideas. Her mushroom risotto is really amazing. In that moment, I realized I was outnumbered in my own kitchen. Rather than create a scene on Thanksgiving, I stepped back. Fine, I'll get out of your way. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I retreated to the living room, feeling like a stranger in my own home as I listened to Jessica rearrange my kitchen, the occasional clatter of a pan followed by, Tyler, where does your mom keep the good knives? These are so dull. When dinner was finally served, my traditional Thanksgiving had been transformed. My turkey was pushed to the side in favor of Jessica's turkey breast. My mashed potatoes were declared too heavy and replaced with mashed cauliflower. My homemade rolls were left in the warming drawer, forgotten in favor of some kind of gluten-free crackers. Isn't this nice? Jessica beamed, raising her glass of organic wine. A health-conscious Thanksgiving that we can all feel good about. Tyler nodded enthusiastically. It's delicious, Jess. I picked at my plate in silence, each bite tasting like disappointment. After dinner, as I stood to clear the plates, Jessica put a hand on my arm. Leave those, Martha. I've got a system for cleaning up. She leaned in and whispered, as if sharing a confidence. Between us, your organization could use an update. I noticed your pantry is still using those old plastic containers. They're full of BPA, you know. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, but definitely. Like a thread that had been stretched too far for too long. Actually, Jessica, I said calmly, removing her hand from my arm, I think I'm done. For the evening. You two can handle cleanup since you've taken over everything else. I walked out of the dining room, ignoring Tyler's confused, Mom, and went straight to my bedroom, closing the door firmly behind me. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I realized I was shaking, not with anger, but with a strange sense of clarity. This was about more than just Thanksgiving dinner or quinoa or organic turkeys. This was about my place in my son's life, in my own home. Frank would have known exactly what to say. He always had a way of cutting through confusion with simple wisdom. Marty, he would have said, using the nickname only he was allowed to use, don't let anyone push you out of your own story. I spent the rest of the evening in my room, emerging only briefly to say goodnight when Tyler and Jessica left. Tyler hugged me awkwardly, whispering, Sorry about dinner, Mom. Jessica just gets excited about sharing her lifestyle. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. The next morning, I woke up with purpose. Over my usual cup of coffee, I made a list of options. I could confront Jessica and Tyler directly. I could try to find a compromise. Or I could take a completely different approach. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Linda Matthews, my best friend since college and a real estate agent. How was Thanksgiving with the Wonder couple? She asked, knowing about the tensions from our previous conversations. Let's just say Jessica redecorated my Thanksgiving the way she wants to redecorate my life. I sighed, then found myself spilling the whole story. Linda listened without interrupting, a gift she'd perfected over 40 years of friendship. So, basically, she summarized when I finished, they want your house, and Jessica wants to erase any trace of your influence from Tyler's life. That about sums it up, I agreed. Well, what are you going to do about it? I stared out the window at my frost-covered garden, where Frank and I had spent countless Sunday afternoons planting perennials and planning our futures. I'm not sure yet, but I know I'm not giving up my home just because Jessica thinks I belong in a senior community with my herbs on a tiny balcony. Linda was quiet for a moment. You know, the Harrises next door to you are listing their house in spring. Waterfront properties in your neighborhood are going for a fortune these days. Linda, I just told you I don't want to sell. I'm not saying you should sell to Tyler and Jessica, Linda clarified. I'm saying your house is probably worth 3 times what you and Frank paid for it. If you did decide to sell, on your terms to someone who would actually pay market value, you could afford to buy any home you wanted, even that Victorian on Elmwood Drive you've always loved. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. The Carmichael house on Elmwood had been my dream home since I was a girl. Frank and I used to walk by it on Sunday afternoons, admiring its gingerbread trim and wraparound porch. The Carmichael house is for sale? Listed yesterday. Margaret Carmichael is moving to Arizona to be near her daughter. It needs some updating. But it's got that kitchen bay window you've always talked about. My mind raced with possibilities. The Carmichael house was smaller than my current home, but it had charm and character that the sleek, modern condos Jessica had in mind could never match. And the kitchen, I'd peeked in the windows enough times to know it had potential to be magnificent with the right renovations. How much? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Linda named a figure that was significant, but well within what my current house would likely sell for. Let me think about it, I said, but already a plan was forming in my mind. That afternoon, I drove by the Carmichael house, slowing to take in its Victorian splendor. The blue paint was faded and the porch needed repair, but I could see beyond those superficial flaws to what it could become. A fresh start, on my terms. I called Linda back that evening. Can you get me a showing of the Carmichael house tomorrow? Already scheduled for 10 a.m., she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I had a feeling. The next morning, I walked through Margaret Carmichael's home with a growing sense of excitement. The interior needed updating, but the bones were solid. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, and that kitchen bay window that would be perfect for an herb garden and breakfast nook. It's everything I remembered, I told Linda as we stood in the spacious kitchen. But better. So, what's the plan? Linda asked. Are you ready to list your place? I thought about Tyler and Jessica, about Thanksgiving and quinoa and being pushed aside in my own home. Not yet, I said slowly. I need to handle this carefully. Tyler's still my son, and I don't want to hurt him. But I do want to teach them both a lesson about respect. Linda raised an eyebrow. Martha Sullivan, you've got that look. The same one you had when you orchestrated that fundraiser takeover from Diane Peterson in 2012. I smiled, remembering how I'd outmaneuvered the most controlling woman on the school board. I'm not going to do anything drastic, just strategic. Back. At home, I sat in Frank's old armchair, thinking through my next steps. The solution came to me as I gazed at our wedding photo on the mantel, Frank in his navy uniform, me in my simple white dress, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. Would sell the house, but not to Tyler and Jessica, not even to a stranger, at least not yet. Instead, I would use it as leverage to regain control of my relationship with my son and to put Jessica in her place, once and for all. Christmas was coming up in a few weeks. Tyler had already asked if they could spend it at my house again. Hi. Course, I'd said. I'll make the usual Christmas dinner. Great, Tyler had replied, hesitantly adding, and maybe this time we can all cook together. I had agreed, knowing now what cooking together really meant in Jessica's vocabulary. But this Christmas was going to be different. This Christmas, I would be serving up something unexpected, a taste of their own medicine, with a side of humble. Hey! I picked up my phone and texted Linda. Make me an offer on the Carmichael house. I'm ready. Then I settled back in Frank's chair, a plan taking shape that would either bring my family back together on equal footing or set me free to start a new chapter without them. Either way, I would no longer be a guest in my own kitchen. And Jessica was about to learn that this traditional old lady still had a few tricks up her sleeve. The week before Christmas, I made my first move. I invited Linda over for coffee and strategically left paperwork for the Carmichael house offer on my kitchen island. The pre-approval letter from the bank was prominently displayed, along with Margaret Carmichael's counteroffer and some renovation estimates. "Are you sure about this?" Linda asked, stirring her coffee. "It's a big step." "I've never been more certain," I replied, loud enough to be heard from the living room, where I'd accidentally left the windows open despite the December chill. Right on cue, we heard a car door slam. Tyler and Jessica were arriving for their pre-Christmas visit, a day earlier than expected. "That must be Tyler and Jessica," I said, making no move to hide the paperwork. "They mentioned they might stop by today to drop off some gifts." Linda winked at me, catching on immediately. "Should I move these house documents?" "No need," I replied casually. "They'll find out eventually." The front door opened and Tyler called out, "Mom, we thought we'd surprise you." I walked into the hallway, giving my son a warm hug. "What a lovely surprise. Linda's here too. We're just having coffee." Jessica followed behind Tyler, carrying a large shopping bag emblazoned with an upscale department store logo. "We brought some new Christmas decorations," she announced. "I noticed last year that yours were getting a bit vintage." I smiled thinly. "How thoughtful. Come into the kitchen. I'll pour you both some coffee." Tyler and Jessica followed me, with Jessica immediately scanning the room as if making a mental inventory of what she'd change next. Her eyes landed on the paperwork spread across the island. "What's all this?" she asked, setting down her bag and peering at the documents. "Oh, just some house paperwork," I said vaguely. Linda and I were discussing a property. Tyler picked up the bank letter, his eyebrows shooting up as he read it. "Mom, this is a pre-approval letter. For you? Are you buying another house?" I took a deliberate sip of my coffee. "I'm considering it." Jessica grabbed the paper from Tyler's hand. "The Carmichael house on Elmwood? Isn't that the old Victorian with the peeling paint?" "It has excellent bones," Linda interjected professionally. "And the location is prime, walking distance to the lake and the new artisanal marketplace." "But why would you need another house?" Tyler asked, confusion evident in his voice. I shrugged. "Who said anything about another house? If I buy the Carmichael place, I'd sell this one, of course." The coffee mug in Tyler's hand froze halfway to his lips. "Sell? But this is our family home." "It's my home, Tyler," I corrected gently. "And as Jessica has pointed out several times, it's too big for just one person." Jessica's face had gone pale beneath her perfect makeup. "But we talked about—" She stopped herself, glancing at Linda. "About me selling to you at a family discount?" I finished for her. "Yes, we did. But then I got thinking, why settle for less than market value? This neighborhood has appreciated considerably. Linda thinks we could list at nearly triple what your father and I paid." "But where would you go?" Tyler pressed, still struggling to process this development. "The Carmichael house," I replied simply. "It's smaller, as Jessica suggested I need, but it has charm, and the kitchen has potential for a complete renovation. I could design it exactly how I want it." Jessica set down the paperwork, her jaw tight. "You never mentioned you were thinking of moving." "You never asked," I countered. "You just assumed I'd hand over this house when it suited your timeline." I turned to Linda. "Would you mind giving us a moment, Linda? Family matter." Linda nodded, gathering her purse. "Of course. Martha, call me later about that counteroffer. The Prescotts are also interested in the Carmichael place, so we shouldn't wait too long." After Linda left, an uncomfortable silence filled the kitchen. Tyler looked bewildered, while Jessica's expression had shifted from shock to calculation. "Mom," Tyler finally began, "we always assumed that someday when you were ready you might want to downsize and let us take over this house. It's where I grew up, where we'd want to raise our kids." "That was your assumption, not mine," I replied. "And after Thanksgiving, it became very clear to me that this house, especially this kitchen, is no longer my space when you two are here." Jessica had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. "Martha, if this is about Thanksgiving, I was only trying to help. Sometimes older people get set in their ways and—" "I'm not older people, Jessica. I'm Martha. A specific person with specific tastes and traditions that you steamrolled over because you think your way is better." Tyler stepped in, always the mediator. "Mom, Jess didn't mean to upset you. We both respect your traditions." "Do you?" I challenged. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're both waiting for me to become irrelevant so you can take over my home and erase any trace of the life your father and I built." Tyler's face crumpled. "That's not fair, Mom." "Isn't it?" I stood up, suddenly tired of the pretense. "Tyler, when was the last time you defended one of my traditions instead of backing Jessica's improvements? When was the last time you reminded her that this is my home, not a project for her to renovate?" Tyler opened his mouth, then closed, unable to come up with an example. Jessica, ever the strategist, shifted tactics. "Martha, we all got off on the wrong foot. Of course this is your home and we respect that. The last thing we want is for you to feel pushed out." She placed a hand on Tyler's arm. "Tell her, Tyler." Tyler nodded eagerly. "Mom, we love you. We want what's best for you." "Then respect my decisions," I said firmly, "including my decision to explore selling this house on the open market if and when I choose to downsize." The conversation ended in an uneasy truce. Tyler and Jessica stayed for another hour, their earlier enthusiasm for redecorating my Christmas notably dampened. When they left, Jessica hugged me with newfound warmth. "We'll see you on Christmas Eve, Martha. I'm looking forward to cooking together. Your way, of course." I smiled, knowing the first phase of my plan had worked perfectly. The threat of losing their future home had suddenly made them reconsider how they treated its current owner. The next day, I called Linda. "It worked like a charm. Jessica practically promised to respect my cooking traditions at Christmas." Linda laughed. "So are you really going through with the Carmichael house purchase?" "I've made the counter offer as planned," I confirmed. "But whether I complete the sale depends on what happens next." Christmas Eve arrived with a light dusting of snow that made Maple Lane look like a holiday card. I had spent the previous day baking cookies and preparing side dishes, deliberately leaving the main courses for when Tyler and Jessica arrived. This would be the true test of their newfound respect. They arrived punctually at noon, arms laden, with tastefully wrapped gifts and a single grocery bag. "Just a few organic vegetables," Jessica explained when she saw me eyeing the bag. "To supplement whatever you're making. Your recipes, of course." I nodded, accepting this small compromise. "I thought we'd make lasagna for Christmas Eve, Frank's mother's recipe." Tyler's face lit up. "Grandma Sullivan's lasagna? You haven't made that in years." "It seemed like a good time to revive the tradition," I said, noting with satisfaction how Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. In the kitchen, I assigned tasks. Jessica chopped vegetables while Tyler grated cheese, and I prepared the meat sauce using Frank's mother's cast-iron skillet, the one Jessica had previously declared impossible to clean properly. To my surprise, Jessica was the model of cooperation. She followed my instructions without suggesting alternatives, complimented the richness of the sauce, and even asked thoughtful questions about the Sullivan family recipe. "Frank's mother brought this recipe from Italy," I explained, stirring the sauce. "She was from a small village outside Naples. The secret is cooking it low and slow." "It smells amazing," Jessica admitted. "Much more complex than the sauce I usually make." That's the wine and the bay leaves, I explained. They need time to meld with the meat. By the time we assembled the lasagna, a new atmosphere had developed in the kitchen. Not quite the easy camaraderie I'd once shared with Tyler, but a workable piece. Jessica deferred to my expertise, and Tyler seemed relieved by the lack of tension. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with dessert, Tyler broached the subject I knew had been on their minds. "Mom, about the house situation," I raised, a hand to stop him. "Not tonight, Tyler. It's Christmas Eve." "I know, but this is important." He glanced at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. "We've been talking, and we want to apologize for making you feel pushed aside. This is your home, and you should never feel unwelcome in it, especially in your kitchen." Jessica leaned forward. "We were thinking, if you're really considering selling, maybe we could come to an arrangement that works for everyone. You could sell to us at full market value, not a family discount." I raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a change of heart." "We've been saving," Tyler explained, "and Jessica's parents offered to help with the down payment. We could make it work." I set down my dessert plate. "And what would this arrangement look like? Would I be expected to move out immediately?" "Not at all," Jessica jumped in. "We were thinking more of a transition period. Maybe you could stay until the Carmichael renovations are complete, or even longer if you wanted." I studied them both, sensing the genuineness in Tyler's expression and the calculated compromise in Jessica's. They wanted the house badly enough to meet my terms, at least on the surface. "I'll think about it," I promised. "But I'm not making any decisions until after the holidays." The rest of Christmas passed pleasantly enough. On Christmas morning, among the other gifts, Jessica presented me with a leather-bound recipe book. "I thought maybe you could write down some of the Sullivan family recipes," she explained. "So, they don't get lost." The gesture was thoughtful, if somewhat ironic, coming from the woman who had dismissed those very recipes as outdated just a month earlier. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "That's very thoughtful." The day after Christmas, Tyler and Jessica left to visit her parents for a few days. As I cleaned up the kitchen, returning it to my preferred organization after Jessica's subtle rearrangements, I pondered my next move. Linda called that afternoon. "Margaret Carmichael accepted your counteroffer. We can close in 30 days if you want to proceed. So, what's the verdict? Did Christmas change your mind about Tyler and Jessica?" I sighed, running my hand along the kitchen counter where Frank and I had shared countless morning coffees. "They're trying." Jessica managed to go 2 whole days without suggesting I replace my toxic nonstick pans. Linda snorted. "High praise indeed. But the real question is, do you trust that it will last? Or is this just good behavior to secure the house?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I admitted. A week later, Tyler called to follow up on their offer. "Jessica and I have been pre-approved for a mortgage," he reported excitedly. "We can match any reasonable offer you might get on the open market." "That's wonderful, Tyler. But I haven't decided whether I'm selling yet," I reminded him. "I'm still considering my options." His voice faltered. "But the Carmichael house is one possibility," I finished for him. "But there are others. I might decide to stay right where I am." There was a pause before Tyler spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. "Mom, is this about punishing Jessica? Because she's really trying to make amends." "This isn't about punishment, Tyler. It's about respect. And one pleasant Christmas doesn't erase months of Jessica treating me like an inconvenient obstacle to her plans." "That's not fair," Tyler protested. "Jessica admires you. She just has different ideas about things." "Different ideas are fine. Imposing those ideas and dismissing mine is not." The conversation ended with Tyler frustrated, and me more confused than ever about what to do. That night, unable to sleep, I wandered downstairs to the kitchen. Standing in the dark, illuminated only by the moonlight streaming through the windows, I tried to imagine strangers living in this space. Would they appreciate the way the morning sun hit the breakfast nook? Would they use the herb garden I meticulously maintained for decades? Then I tried to imagine Tyler and Jessica as the owners. Would Jessica gut the cherry cabinets Frank had installed with his own hands? Would the kitchen become a showcase of modern minimalism, with no trace of the Sullivan family history? Neither option felt right. The next morning, I called Linda. I need you to arrange a showing of the Carmichael house for Tyler and Jessica. Are you sure? Linda asked, surprised. Absolutely. It's time they see what I'm considering. 2 days later, I met Tyler and Jessica outside the Victorian on Elmwood Drive. Jessica looked skeptical as she surveyed the peeling exterior paint and sagging porch steps. It's a fixer-upper, she commented as we approached the front door. It has potential, I corrected. Wait until you see inside. Linda met us in the foyer, handing out information sheets with the property details. As we toured the rooms, I pointed out features that had captured my imagination. The original crown molding, the stained glass accents, and most importantly, the kitchen with its bay window. This could be spectacular, I explained, standing in the outdated kitchen. I'd remove this wall to open it up to the dining room, add an island here, and the bay window would be perfect for an expanded herb garden and breakfast area. Tyler looked around, nodding slowly. I can see it, Mom. It suits you. Jessica, however, was unusually quiet, examining the room with a critical eye. What do you think, Jessica? I prompted. She hesitated, then spoke carefully. It's charming, in its way, but it would require extensive renovation. At your age, do you really want to take on such a big project? There it was again. The subtle reminder of my age. The implication that I should be winding down my life rather than embarking on new adventures. My age is precisely why I should do this now, I replied evenly. I have the energy, the vision, and the time. Why wouldn't I create exactly what I want for the next chapter of my life? Jessica looked taken aback. I just meant— I know what you meant, I interrupted. You've made it clear from the beginning that you see me as someone whose time has passed, whose preferences should be set aside for the younger generation. But I'm not done creating my life, Jessica. Far from it. Tyler stepped between us, ever the peacemaker. Mom, Jessica doesn't think that. We both respect your independence. I turned to my son. Do you, Tyler? Because from where I stand, you've been complicit in pushing me to the sidelines. Every time Jessica dismisses my traditions or rearranges my kitchen or suggests I'm too old for something I love, you stand by silently or actively support her. Tyler's face fell. I never meant to make you feel that way. Intentions don't change the impact, I said, softening my tone. I need both of you to understand something. I am not a problem to be managed or an obstacle to your plans. I'm a person with my own dreams and desires, and I deserve to be treated as such, especially by my own family. Linda, sensing the weight of the moment, discreetly stepped outside to give us privacy. Jessica looked genuinely chastened. Martha, I owe you an apology. A real one, not just the polite version I gave at Christmas. She took a deep breath. You're right. I have been dismissive of your preferences because they're different from mine, and I have seen you as, well, as someone whose time had passed, instead of someone with a future still unfolding. That was wrong of me. The sincerity in her voice surprised me. For the first time since I'd met her, Jessica seemed to be speaking without calculation or agenda. Tyler moved to stand beside me, taking my hand. Mom, we don't want to lose you, from our lives or from the family home. But more importantly, we don't want to lose your respect. Tell us how we can make this right. Standing in the kitchen, that could be mine, surrounded by the bones of a house. With its own history and potential, I finally saw the path forward. I need time, I said at last. Time to decide what I truly want without pressure from either of you. And I need to know that whatever I decide, Whether to stay in our family home, sell it to you, or sell it to strangers and move here, you'll support my choice because it's mine to make." "We will," Tyler promised immediately. Jessica nodded, adding, "And in the meantime, no more takeovers of your kitchen, no more suggestions about senior communities, no more treating you like you're just a placeholder until we can take over." "That would be a good start," I agreed. As we left the Carmichael house, something had shifted between us. The power dynamic had rebalanced. For the first time since Frank died, I felt truly seen by my son and daughter-in-law, not as Tyler's widowed mother or a convenient source of real estate, but as Martha Sullivan, a woman with agency and dreams of her own. Back in my kitchen that evening, I ran my hands along the cherry cabinets Frank had installed, feeling the smooth wood grain beneath my fingers. This house held so many memories, so much of our family history. But perhaps the most important legacy wasn't the physical structure, but the values we passed down through generations: respect, independence, and the courage to stand up for oneself. Pulled out my phone and texted Linda, "I've made my decision." Her response came immediately, and I smiled, typing, "I'll tell you tomorrow, but I think everyone's going to be surprised." Placing the phone down, I looked around the kitchen. My sanctuary, my domain, the heart of the home Frank and I had built together. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: I would never again be a guest in my own kitchen. And Tyler and Jessica had learned a valuable lesson about underestimating a 65-year-old widow from Vermont. Some might call it petty revenge, but I preferred to think of it as a necessary recalibration. Sometimes, the most important ingredient in any family recipe isn't found in the pantry. It's the seasoned wisdom that comes from standing your ground when it matters most. The morning after our tour of the Carmichael house, I woke with unusual clarity. For months, I'd been reacting to Tyler and Jessica's pressure, allowing their timeline and preferences to dictate my choices. Even my clever plan to use the Carmichael house as leverage had been, in its way, a reaction rather than a true decision. Frank had always said that the hardest choices become clear when you stop thinking about what others expect and focus on what brings you joy. Standing in my kitchen that morning, watching the sunrise paint the walls the same golden hue it had for 28 years, I finally understood what I truly wanted. I called Linda first thing. "I need you to set up a meeting with the Carmichaels and their realtor, today if possible." "So you're going through with it?" Linda asked, excitement evident in her voice. "Not exactly," I replied, "but I have a proposition for everyone involved." By noon, I was sitting in Linda's office with Margaret Carmichael, a silver-haired woman about my age with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her realtor, a young man named Brian, looked slightly confused about why this meeting had been called. "Mrs. Sullivan is interested in the property," Linda began, "but has an unconventional proposal." All eyes turned to me, and I took a deep breath. "Mrs. Carmichael, I understand you're moving to Arizona to be closer to your daughter." Margaret nodded. "After Henry passed, the house became too much. Elizabeth has been asking me to move near her for years." "What if you didn't have to sell right away?" I asked. "What if there was a way for you to move to Arizona now, but finalize the sale of your house later, at potentially a higher price once certain improvements are made?" Brian frowned. "Are you suggesting a rent-to-own arrangement?" "Not exactly," I said, opening a folder containing the plans I'd stayed up half the night drafting. "I'm proposing a partnership of sorts. I would lease the Carmichael house for 1 year, during which time I would fund and oversee specific renovations, primarily to the kitchen, master bath, and exterior. These improvements would significantly increase the property value." I slid the folder toward Margaret. "In exchange for allowing these renovations, you would grant me right of first refusal to purchase the house at the end of the lease, at a price we agree upon today plus 50% of the increased property value from the renovations." Brian started to object, but Margaret held up a hand to silence him as she examined my plans. "These are extensive changes," she noted, tracing her finger over the kitchen redesign. "Why would you invest so much in a house you don't own?" "Because I might want to own it eventually," I explained. "But I need time to decide if it's truly right for me. And in the meantime, I have a specific project in mind." I pulled out another document, a business plan for Sullivan's Kitchen, a small cooking school and event space I had conceptualized during my sleepless night. For years, people have asked me to teach them family recipes and cooking techniques. This would give me the opportunity to try it out without committing to a permanent location yet. Margaret studied the business plan, then looked up at me with new understanding. "You want to test a dream?" I nodded. "Exactly. And if it works, I'll buy the house. If not, you'll have a significantly upgraded property to sell." "What about your current house?" Linda asked. "You can't maintain two properties." "That's where my son and daughter-in-law come in," I said. "I'm willing to lease my house to them for the same 1-year period, with an option for them to buy if they still want to at the end of that time." Brian looked skeptical. "This seems unnecessarily complicated. Why not just sell and buy outright?" Margaret shot him a look that immediately quieted him. "Because Mrs. Sullivan is being sensible. Big life changes shouldn't be rushed." She turned, back to me. "Henry and I moved 6 times during our marriage. The houses we regretted were always the ones we decided on too quickly." She extended her hand. "I like your proposal, Mrs. Sullivan, but I want 60% of the added value, not 50. I smiled, recognizing a fellow negotiator. 55, and I'll add landscaping improvements to the front yard." "Done," Margaret agreed, shaking my hand firmly. Linda looked between us, amused. "I'll draw up the paperwork this afternoon." As I drove home, a weight had lifted from my shoulders. For the first time since Frank's death, I was making a proactive choice about my future, rather than merely responding to loss or pressure. I was creating something new, not just a renovated kitchen, but potentially a new chapter of my life. Calling Tyler was the next step, and the one I most dreaded. My son had always seen me as the stable, unchanging center of his life. How would he react to this uncharacteristic leap into uncertainty? I waited until evening, inviting him over for coffee. Alone. "No Jessica tonight?" I asked when he arrived, noticing her absence. "She had a late meeting," Tyler explained, looking around warily as if expecting another bombshell like the house paperwork. "You sounded serious on the phone. Have you made a decision about the house?" I gestured for him to sit at the kitchen table where I'd laid out copies of all the documents I'd signed that day, along with my business plan. "I've decided not to sell right away," I began, watching relief flood his face. "Instead, I'm trying something different." As I outlined my arrangement with Margaret Carmichael and my plans for Sullivan's Kitchen, Tyler's expression shifted from relief to confusion to something I hadn't seen before, genuine admiration. "Mom, this is entrepreneurial," he said when I finished. "I never knew you wanted to start a business." "Neither did I, until recently," I admitted. "But teaching cooking has always brought me joy, and without your father—" I paused, gathering my thoughts. "I need purpose, Tyler. Something that's mine. Something new." To my surprise, Tyler reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Dad would be proud. He always said you were the creative one in the relationship." I smiled, remembering how Frank had always bragged about my cooking to his Navy buddies. "There's more to my plan," I continued. "It involves you and Jessica if you're interested." Tyler listened intently as I explained the lease arrangement. I was proposing for our family home. 1 year, with an option to buy at market value if all parties agreed at the end of that time. "You'd live here? While you're renovating the Carmichael kitchen and testing your business?" I nodded. "You'd have the space you want for starting a family, and I'd have time to determine if my new venture is viable. No one has to make permanent decisions yet." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, processing the proposal. And after a year? After a year, we'll know more. If Sullivan's Kitchen takes off, I might want to buy the Carmichael house and sell this one to you. If not, I might want to come back here, and you can keep looking for your forever home without pressure. It's a good plan, Tyler acknowledged. Very logical. But I have to ask, is this also about keeping Jessica at arm's length while you decide if you can trust her? His perception surprised me. My son was more insightful than I'd given him credit for. Partially, I admitted. The Thanksgiving incident showed me how quickly I could become irrelevant in my own home. I need to know that both of you can respect boundaries before I commit to such a significant change. Rather than becoming defensive, Tyler nodded thoughtfully. That's fair. We didn't handle things well. He looked around the kitchen, seeing it perhaps through new eyes. This space really is the heart of you and Dad's legacy. We should have been more sensitive to that. You're learning, I said gently. We all are. That's why I think this arrangement gives everyone breathing room. Tyler took the lease agreement I'd prepared, scanning its terms. I'll need to discuss this with Jessica, but I think she'll agree, especially the option to buy at the end of the term. Take your time, I said. It's an important decision. After Tyler left, I stood in my kitchen, potentially my kitchen for only one more month, and felt a curious mixture of nostalgia and excitement. Change was coming, whether I was ready or not. But for the first time in years, I was the one initiating. Jessica called the next morning, her voice uncharacteristically tentative. Tyler told me about your proposal. It's very generous. It's practical, I corrected, for everyone involved. He also told me about Sullivan's Kitchen. It sounds wonderful, Martha. You're obviously a gifted cook. You should share that with others. Her compliment seemed genuine, lacking the condescending tone I'd grown accustomed to. Thank you, Jessica. That means a lot. There was a pause before she continued. I know I've been difficult, controlling, especially about the kitchen and your traditions. Another pause. The truth is, I've always been intimidated by you. Intimidated? By me? I couldn't hide my surprise. Tyler talks about you like you're Superwoman, the perfect mother who cooked everything from scratch and kept this beautiful home while working full-time. He still says nobody makes apple pie, like his mom. She sighed. I can't compete with that, so I tried to establish my own territory by changing things. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. In all our interactions, Jessica had projected nothing but confidence and superiority. This glimpse of insecurity humanized her in a way I hadn't expected. Jessica, you don't need to compete with me. Tyler chose you because you're you, not because you're like me or unlike me. I know that rationally, she admitted. But emotions aren't always rational, especially when you're trying to find your place in a new family. We were silent for a moment, two strong-willed women reaching across a divide neither of us had created intentionally. I think your lease idea is smart, Jessica finally said. It gives all of us time. And I promise to respect your kitchen while we're there. No rearranging cabinets or replacing your cookware. I laughed. You can replace the non-stick pans if... You really think they're toxic? Frank bought those at a hardware store sale 15 years ago. Deal, Jessica said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. And maybe you could show me how to make Tyler's favorite apple pie sometime. I'd like that, I replied, meaning it. The next 4 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. I signed the official lease agreement with Margaret Carmichael, hired contractors for the initial renovations, and began packing essential items to move to the Carmichael house. Tyler and Jessica signed their lease for my home, with Jessica proving surprisingly respectful about which furnishings would stay and which would come with me. Linda helped coordinate everything, showing up with boxes and organizational labels. I still can't believe Martha Sullivan is taking a risk, she teased as we sorted through kitchen equipment. You who refused to change your hairstyle for 20 years. Maybe it was time for more than a haircut, I replied, running my fingers through my newly shortened bob. Another change I'd impulsively made the previous week. Moving day arrived with unexpected emotions. As the movers loaded my most treasured pieces into their truck, I found myself lingering in each room, saying goodbye to the space where so much of my life had unfolded. In the kitchen, I stood silently, remembering countless family meals, holiday preparations, and late-night talks with Frank. Tyler found me there, staring at the empty space where my grandmother's hutch had stood. "You okay, Mom?" I nodded, blinking, back tears. "Just remembering. Your father proposed to me right where you're standing. Did you know that?" Tyler shook his head. "You never told me that story. He was supposed to do it at the restaurant, but he got so nervous he blurted it out while I was making breakfast." I smiled at the memory. He had the ring in his pocket and dropped it. We spent an hour looking for it under the refrigerator. Tyler laughed, then grew serious. "Mom, if this is too hard, you don't have to go through with it. This will always be your home." I touched his cheek, seeing the boy he had been and the man he had become. "A home isn't just walls and floors, Tyler. It's the life you build and the love you share. I'm not losing those by trying something new." Later that afternoon, I stood in Margaret Carmichael's kitchen, my kitchen, at least temporarily, surrounded by boxes and unfamiliar angles. The bay window caught the late afternoon sun exactly as I'd hoped, illuminating the space where my cooking school would soon take shape. Linda arrived with champagne to christen the new venture. "To Sullivan's Kitchen," she toasted, handing me a plastic cup. "May it be everything you dreamed." I looked around at the outdated cabinets and peeling wallpaper, all scheduled for renovation within the week, and felt a thrill of anticipation. "It's terrifying," I admitted. "What if nobody signs up for my classes?" "Then you'll have a beautifully renovated kitchen and a story about the time you tried something bold," Linda shrugged. "But that's not going to happen. I've already got a list of 10 women from the garden club who want to sign up for your holiday baking series." "You didn't," I exclaimed. "Of course I did. That's what friends do, believe in each other's dreams enough to recruit the first customers." We laughed, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this friendship that had sustained me through grief and now championed my new beginning. The renovations proceeded quickly, transforming the Victorian kitchen into a bright, welcoming space with professional-grade appliances and an expanded island perfect for teaching small groups. I chose cherry cabinets as a nod to Frank's renovation of our family home, but everything else was designed specifically for Sullivan's Kitchen, practical, beautiful, and unlike any kitchen I'd owned before. My first official class was scheduled for a Saturday in April, 6 weeks after the move. I'd chosen family recipes worth passing down as the theme, featuring my grandmother's apple pie, Frank's mother's lasagna, and my own signature herb bread. The morning of the class, I arrived early to prepare the workspace, arranging ingredients, and setting out recipe cards I'd had professionally printed with the Sullivan's Kitchen logo, another indulgence that felt both frivolous and essential to making this venture real. The doorbell rang precisely at 10, and I opened it to find Tyler and Jessica standing on the porch holding a large gift basket. "What are you doing here?" I asked, surprised. "The class doesn't start until 11. "We're not here for the class," Tyler explained. "We wanted to bring you an opening day gift." Jessica handed me the basket, which contained a professional chef's apron embroidered with Sullivan's Kitchen, a set of high-end measuring spoons, and a framed photo of Frank and me in our original kitchen on the day we moved into the house on Maple Lane. "We found the photo in Dad's old album," Tyler said. "Thought it should be here, where people will learn the recipes he loved." Tears pricked my eyes as I ran my fingers over the image. Frank and I, impossibly young, standing proudly in a kitchen. We hadn't yet made our own. "This is perfect," I whispered. "Thank you both." Jessica stepped forward hesitantly. "There's something else, Martha." something I need to tell you." I looked up, noticing for the first time a certain glow about her. "You're pregnant," I guessed, seeing the answer in her startled expression. She nodded, a smile spreading across her face. 12 weeks tomorrow. We wanted you to be the first to know." Joy surged through me. Pure, uncomplicated joy unmarred by questions of houses or kitchens or who belonged where. "Oh, my dears," I said, embracing them both. "This is wonderful news." "We're thinking," Tyler began, then looked at Jessica, who nodded encouragingly. "We're thinking that maybe we should start fresh, find our own home, build our own traditions." I stepped back, surprised. "But the lease, the option to buy—" "The house on Maple Lane will always be special to us," Tyler said. "But it's your home, Mom, the place you built with Dad. We were wrong to try to take that from you. But what about your plans for a family? Home? The space you wanted?" I asked, struggling to process this reversal. Jessica's expression was sincere. "We'll find the right place, one that's ours from the beginning." She glanced around the renovated kitchen. "Besides, I think you might want to stay here from the looks of things. This space suits you." I followed her gaze, seeing the Sullivans' kitchen through their eyes, bright, professional, purposeful. A new beginning built on decades of experience. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "That's what this year is for, figuring out what comes next." "Well, whatever you decide," Tyler said. "We'll support it. No more pressure. No more assumptions." As they left, promising to check in after my first class. I hung the apron on a hook by the door and placed the framed photo on a shelf where my students would see it. Frank would have loved this unexpected turn my life had taken. This leap into the unknown. This reclaiming of joy. The doorbell rang again, announcing the arrival of my first real students. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door to welcome 8 women from Linda's Garden Club, all chattering excitedly about learning to make Martha Sullivan's famous apple pie. "Welcome to Sullivan's Kitchen," I said, gesturing inside. "Today we're going to learn recipes worth passing down." As they gathered around the island, admiring the space and asking questions about techniques, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This kitchen, neither the one I'd shared with Frank nor the one Jessica had tried to claim, was uniquely mine. A place where I could honor the past while creating something new. In cooking, as in life, the most memorable dishes often come from adapting traditional recipes to new circumstances. You maintain the essential elements while allowing for innovation. You respect what came before while finding your own voice. My daughter-in-law had tried to push me out of my kitchen, and in doing so, had inadvertently pushed me toward a new purpose. The revenge I'd planned had transformed into something more valuable, a fresh start, a recalibration of family dynamics, and the courage to serve up the next chapter of my life on my own terms. As I demonstrated the perfect technique for crimping pie crust, a skill passed down through 3 generations of Sullivan women, I silently thanked Jessica for the unintended gift her kitchen takeover had given me. The realization that I wasn't finished cooking up new possibilities for my life. Not by a long shot. 1 year after our Thanksgiving kitchen showdown, I stood in the warmly lit dining room of the house on Maple Lane, surveying the elegant chaos of holiday preparations. The Sullivan Family Trust had been officially established 3 months earlier, and this would be our first major gathering in the newly designated family home. The dining room table, the same oak behemoth where Tyler had done his homework and Frank had sorted fishing tackle, was extended to its full glory, set with my grandmother's china that now permanently resided in the hutch. Through the doorway, I could hear laughter from the kitchen, where an unexpected scene was unfolding. Jessica, now 8 months pregnant and radiant despite her unwieldy shape, was instructing her mother Diane in the art of properly crimping a pie crust. Tyler stood nearby, documenting the moment on his phone, while Richard Moore watched in bemusement, cocktail in hand. You need to pinch and twist simultaneously, Jessica was explaining patiently. Like this. Diane, designer blouse protected by one of my old aprons, frowned in concentration. This seems unnecessarily complicated. The caterer could have handled dessert. That's not the point, Mom, Jessica replied, her voice firm but kind. This is a Sullivan family tradition. Martha taught me, and now I'm teaching you. Someday we'll teach the baby. I lingered in the doorway, reluctant to interrupt this moment of generational connection. The kitchen itself looked much as it had during my time there, with a few concessions to modern convenience. A new refrigerator with a water dispenser, a higher-end coffee maker, and the non-stick pans Jessica had insisted on replacing. But the cherry cabinets remained, along with Frank's handcrafted spice rack and the vintage cookie jars I'd collected over decades. Linda appeared at my side, glass of wine in hand. "Quite a transformation," she murmured, nodding toward Jessica and Diane. "In the people, not the kitchen." I smiled, accepting the wine she offered. The kitchen was never really the problem. "No," Linda agreed, "but it made a convenient battlefield. We watched as Jessica guided her mother's hands through another crimping attempt, offering encouragement when Diane finally produced a passable scalloped edge. "There you go," Jessica exclaimed. "You've got it now." Diane's pleased expression was so uncharacteristically genuine, it momentarily transformed her face, revealing the young woman she must have been before layers of social expectation and perfectionism calcified her features. "Martha," Richard called, spotting me in the doorway. "Come tell Diane I'm right about the nutmeg. Too much overpowers the pumpkin." "Actually," Jessica interjected before I could respond, "Martha taught me that the amount of spice is a personal preference. There's no wrong answer if it tastes good to you." Diane looked between us, bemused. "But surely there's a correct measurement in the recipe." "The recipe is more of a guideline," I said, entering the kitchen fully. "The Sullivan philosophy is to learn the rules thoroughly, so you know exactly how and when to break them." Tyler laughed. "That explains so much about my childhood, especially that time you let me paint my bedroom ceiling navy blue with glow-in-the-dark stars." "You were 14 and obsessed with astronomy," I recalled. "It was a reasonable creative expression." "Speaking of creative expression," Linda interjected, "when are you going to show everyone the big news?" All eyes turned to me expectantly. I'd been waiting for the right moment, and with the full family assembled in the kitchen, the heart of our shared history and future, it seemed the time had arrived. "I suppose now is as good a time as any," I conceded, retrieving a folder from my bag in the hallway. Returning to the kitchen, I placed it on the island counter and opened it to reveal glossy promotional materials bearing the Sullivan's Kitchen logo. "Sullivan's Kitchen is expanding," I announced, watching their faces as they registered the professional marketing materials. "The cooking school has been so successful that I've leased the storefront next door to the Carmichael house. Starting in January, we'll offer retail cooking supplies, packaged baking mixes featuring Sullivan family recipes, and a small batch bakery." "Mom," Tyler exclaimed, leafing through the brochure. "This is incredible. When did you put all this together?" "I've been working on the business plan for months," I admitted. "The final pieces fell into place last week when I secured a small business loan." "A loan?" Diane looked startled. "At your age, taking on debt seems risky." Jessica shot her mother a warning look. "It's an investment in a thriving business, Mom. Entrepreneurship doesn't have an expiration date." Richard peered at the financial projections included in the folder. "These numbers are impressive, Martha. You've built something substantial here." "I'm hiring 2 full-time employees after the new year," I continued, warming to my topic. "A retail manager and an assistant cooking instructor to help with the expanded class schedule." "Do you have candidates in mind?" Tyler asked. I hesitated, glancing at Jessica. "Actually, I was hoping to discuss that with you both privately." Diane, picking up on the subtle shift, clapped her hands briskly. "Richard, why don't we check on the guest room?" I want to make sure the crib is properly positioned according to the Feng Shui consultant's recommendations. After they departed, I turned to Tyler and Jessica. I've been thinking about the assistant instructor position. It requires someone who appreciates traditional cooking but can connect with younger students. Someone with organizational skills and a genuine interest in food. Jessica's eyes widened as she caught my meaning. Are you offering me a job? A partnership eventually, I clarified. Part-time to start, while you adjust to motherhood. But, with room to grow as the business expands. Tyler looked between us, clearly stunned. You two, working together? Voluntarily? Jessica laughed, resting a hand on her rounded belly. It's not that shocking, is it? We've come a long way since last Thanksgiving. That's precisely why I'm asking, I explained. You've shown a real affinity for teaching during our mother-daughter sessions. More importantly, you understand what Sullivan's Kitchen is about. Honoring tradition while creating space for personal expression. What about your consulting career? Tyler asked Jessica. I thought you were planning to go back after maternity leave. Jessica exchanged a look with me, a silent communication that would have been unthinkable a year ago. I've been reconsidering. Corporate consulting was my mother's vision for me more than my own. I never admitted how much I disliked the travel, the political navigation, the constant pressure to project perfect competence. You never said anything, Tyler said softly. I never admitted it to myself, Jessica replied. But these past months, helping with Sullivan's Kitchen classes, I've discovered something I genuinely enjoy, something that connects me to a legacy rather than just a paycheck. I watched my son absorb this revelation, seeing him recognize this new dimension of his wife just as I had. The position is yours if you want it, I told Jessica. No pressure. Think about it, discuss it together, and let me know after the holidays. Jessica's smile was radiant. I don't need to think about it. I want this opportunity, Martha. Thank you for trusting me with something so precious to you. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening, followed by voices in the hallway. Linda went to investigate, returning moments later with unexpected guests. Margaret Carmichael and her daughter Elizabeth. Hope we're not intruding, Margaret said, unwinding a colorful scarf from her neck. We were in town visiting Elizabeth's in-laws and thought we'd drop off a housewarming gift for the trust. I embraced them both warmly. You're just in time. For appetizers. Please, join us. Elizabeth handed me a gift bag. Mom insisted on bringing this, said it belonged in this kitchen. Inside was a vintage ceramic cookie jar shaped like a plump Vermont farmhouse, hand-painted in cheerful colors. It was my grandmother's, Margaret explained. She taught me to bake in it when I was little. When you told me about establishing the family trust for this house, it seemed fitting that it should live here now. It's perfect, I said, genuinely, touched by the gesture. Another piece of history to share. As we moved into the living room for pre-dinner drinks, the various strands of our extended chosen family began to intertwine. Richard and Margaret discovered a shared interest in fishing. Elizabeth and Tyler bonded over legal anecdotes as she was also an attorney. Linda charmed everyone with stories of the local real estate market's peculiarities. Jessica found me by the fireplace, slightly apart from the animated conversations. I never expected this, she admitted quietly. When Tyler and I first married, I had such a different vision for our life. Modern, streamlined, efficient. Like your parents' home, I observed. She nodded. I thought that's what success looked like, what I was supposed to want. She gazed around the room, taking in the eclectic furniture, the well-worn comfort of a house that had sheltered generations. But there's something about this place, about what you've created with trust. It's not just a building or an asset, it's a continuation. That's exactly what I hoped for, I agreed. Not preservation for its own sake, but evolution with respect for what came before. Like Sullivan's Kitchen, Jessica mused. honoring traditional recipes while allowing each cook to make them their own. Precisely. I studied her thoughtfully. You know, for someone raised by Diane Moore, you have remarkable insight into the value of imperfection. Jessica laughed softly. Perhaps because I spent so many years trying and failing to be perfect. She met my gaze directly. I owe you an apology, Martha. A real one, not the strategic ones I've offered before. You've already apologized? I reminded her. For trying to take over your kitchen, yes, but not for what was beneath that behavior. She took a deep breath. I was threatened by you, by the bond you had with Tyler, by the way he revered your traditions. I thought I had to erase your influence to establish my own. And now I understand that legacy isn't a zero-sum game. My child can learn your pie crust technique and my mother's ridiculous formal table settings and whatever new traditions Tyler and I create in our bungalow. It's all part of a richer inheritance than I initially understood. Before I could respond, Tyler called everyone to the dining room, where the Thanksgiving table awaited in all its chaotic glory. Multiple serving dishes crowded the surface, my traditional recipes alongside Jessica's healthier alternatives, Margaret's Arizona-inspired cornbread stuffing, and even Diane's contribution of a quinoa pomegranate salad that had become her signature dish over the past year. As we settled around the table, Tyler raised his glass. Before we begin, I'd like to propose a toast. To my mother, Martha Sullivan, who taught me that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, but about creating something new and meaningful. Here, Linda seconded. And to family, Jessica added, both the one we're born into and the one we build along the way. Glasses clinked as the diverse group we'd assembled, connected by blood, marriage, friendship, and circumstance, joined in the toast. Looking around the table, I marveled at how differently this scene had unfolded from what I'd imagined a year ago when Jessica first tried to claim my kitchen. Back then, I'd wanted revenge, to teach my daughter-in-law a lesson about respect and boundaries. I'd plotted and maneuvered, using real estate as leverage in what I perceived as a battle for my place in my son's life. What I hadn't anticipated was how the situation would transform all of us. Jessica had found her voice apart from her mother's expectations. Tyler had grown into his role as mediator and supporter, rather than passive bystander. And I had discovered a new chapter that would have remained closed if not for the conflict that forced me to reevaluate what I truly wanted. After dinner, as the conversation and laughter continued around the table, I slipped away to the kitchen for a quiet moment. The dishes were piled high, the counters dusted with flour and scattered with spice jars, evidence of the collaborative meal we'd created. Frank's presence felt especially tangible in this room, where we'd spent so many evenings cooking together, planning our future, dreaming of the family gatherings we'd host as we grew older. I could almost hear his voice. See, Marty, it all worked out, just not how you expected. Jessica appeared in the doorway, concerned about etching her features. Everything okay? You disappeared suddenly. Just catching my breath, I assured her. And having a moment with Frank. He would have loved all of this. She stepped into the kitchen, leaning against the counter beside me. Tyler tells me stories about him sometimes. He sounds like he was a wonderful man. He was, I confirmed. Practical but romantic, steady but adventurous when it mattered. He would have been so proud of Sullivan's kitchen. And of you, Jessica added quietly, for building something new instead of just protecting what was. From the dining room, we heard Tyler calling for coffee and dessert. Jessica straightened, automatically reaching for the dessert plates. We should get back. Wait, I said, opening a drawer and retrieving a small wrapped package I'd hidden there earlier. This is for you, an early Christmas gift. Jessica unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small, leather-bound notebook embossed with the Sullivan's Kitchen logo and her name. Inside, The first page bore an inscription in my handwriting. For the newest keeper of Sullivan family traditions. Make them your own. It's beautiful, she whispered, running her fingers over the embossed cover. It's where you'll record your own adaptations of family recipes, I explained. The versions you create that will someday be passed down with your name attached. Every great cook needs their own recipe book. She embraced me then, this woman who had once seemed like an adversary, but now stood beside me as family in the truest sense. Thank you for not giving up on me, she murmured, even when I was at my most difficult. Thank you for pushing me out of my comfort zone, I replied honestly, even if that wasn't your intention. We returned to the dining room together, carrying coffee and dessert plates, two women who had found unexpected common ground in the kitchen she'd once tried to claim and I'd schemed to protect. As the evening progressed into a relaxed after-dinner gathering, I found myself beside Margaret Carmichael on the living room sofa, watching our blended group of family and friends with quiet satisfaction. Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this? Margaret asked, nodding toward the room where Diane was showing Linda photos on her phone. Tyler and Richard were debating basketball statistics, and Jessica was chatting animatedly with Elizabeth about nursery designs. Not in the slightest, I admitted. A year ago, I was plotting to use your house as leverage in what I thought was a territorial battle with my daughter-in-law. Margaret chuckled. And I was planning to move to Arizona and never look back at this town. Yet, here we are, both with roots reestablished in unexpected ways. Life has a funny way of rerouting our carefully made plans, I observed. Indeed, it does, she agreed. Elizabeth's husband lost his job last month. That engineering firm he'd been with for 20 years. They're struggling to decide what comes next. I never anticipated being needed here again, but family circumstances change. Will you stay in Arizona? I asked. Margaret sighed. I'm not sure. The condo is lovely, but this visit has reminded me how much I miss Vermont. And with the grandkids potentially needing more support. You know, I said thoughtfully, Sullivan's kitchen could use a part-time administrative assistant. Someone organized, mature, with good people skills. The hours would be flexible. Margaret's eyes lit up with interest. Are you offering me a job, Martha Sullivan? Just floating a possibility, I replied with a smile. For when you visit Vermont, or if you decide to split your time between here and Arizona. I'll think about it, she promised, but her expression suggested she already found the idea appealing. Later that night, after our guests had departed and Tyler and Jessica had retreated to the master bedroom, now theirs whenever they stayed, at the Maple Lane house, I sat alone in the kitchen, savoring the peaceful aftermath of a successful gathering. Linda joined me, pouring us both a final glass of wine. Well, Martha Sullivan, did your revenge plot turn out as you expected? I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. Not even close. It turned out to be infinitely better. You realize what you've done, don't you? Linda asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. You've created an entirely new family structure, not just the trust for this house, but a whole interconnected community centered around food and tradition. I suppose I have, I agreed, surveying the kitchen that had once been my exclusive domain and was now a shared family resource. Though I never could have predicted Margaret Carmichael would become part of our extended circle. Or that you and Jessica would become business partners, Linda added. Life is full of surprises when you leave room for them. The next morning, I woke early and drove to Sullivan's kitchen, my kitchen, in the home that had once been Margaret's and was now undeniably mine. The Victorian architecture still charmed me, but it was the renovated teaching space that truly felt like the physical manifestation of my evolving identity. I started the coffee and began preparing for the day's class. Holiday brunch specialties, already fully booked with an enthusiastic group of students. As I moved around the kitchen, gathering ingredients and setting up workstations, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. A year ago, I'd felt pushed out of my own kitchen by a daughter-in-law who seemed determined to erase the traditions I cherished. I'd responded with a plan born of resentment and a desire to reassert control. Yet that plan, with all its unexpected detours and revelations, had led to something I never could have designed intentionally. A richer, more expansive life filled with new purpose and deeper connections. Jessica had been right that day in my kitchen when she'd said traditions could evolve. What she hadn't understood then, what perhaps none of us had fully grasped, was that evolution didn't mean replacement. It meant growth, adaptation, and the integration of old and new into something stronger and more resilient than either could be alone. By trying to push me out of my kitchen, Jessica had inadvertently pushed me toward a future I might never have envisioned for myself. And in my attempt to teach her a lesson about respect, I'd learned profound lessons about letting go, about the difference between preserving the past and honoring it while moving forward. As the first students arrived for class, greeting me with enthusiasm and questions about the day's recipes, I welcomed them into the space that had become so much more than just a kitchen. It had become the crucible for unexpected transformations. Mine, Jessica's, and our entire family's. Sometimes, I reflected as I demonstrated the perfect technique for folding cranberries into scone dough, the most nourishing recipes are the ones we never planned to make, the ones that emerge from the ingredients life hands us, even when those ingredients initially seem bitter or unwelcome. Jessica had said I couldn't cook in my own kitchen. She'd been wrong about that, but right about something more important. That sometimes the most delicious possibilities come from stepping beyond the familiar recipes we've always followed and daring to create something entirely new. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.